Chapter 14 takeaway. Chapter 14 surrounds the culture of journalism and how it is in many ways circled back to its origins of the partisan press, where news outlets seem to show preference to one side rather than focusing on centrist ideas and appealing to a wider audience. Reading the chapter evoked numerous ideas concerning media issues such as dilution, bias, and breeding competition and divisiveness. News is an integral and inescapable part of American culture. That is even more true today than it was when the printing press was first invented. Just like every form of media existing, we now have seemingly endless ways to consume news. Social media, Google, internet news sites, radio, television, and the somewhat dying newspaper. This seems like it should be a good thing. It is almost counterintuitive that more information would equal less understanding. However, people are overloaded by information on a regular basis, leading them to either become desensitized to it or not really know where they land or what they believe is fact. Furthermore, when it was mentioned in the chapter that most people get their news through Google searches and social media sites like Facebook, it immediately gave me pause. Google works off recommendation algorithms that return results to you based on your search history and pages you've interacted with. Facebook essentially does the same by showing you stories it thinks will appeal to you based on your previous interactions with the application. So, not only is there an issue of information overload and quality of information, but it allows people to live in a bubble that only reinforces their ideas and values, but never challenges them or portrays a different side of the same story. Or it leaves people unaware entirely of news stories that might not directly affect them. One of the cornerstones of so called good journalism is to craft your reports free of bias or agenda. Journalism of verification dictates that the facts come first and the truth is paramount to the story. The chapter seems to consistently posit that most journalists still adhere to this, and that instances of perceived bias just exist in a gray area of impossible ethical dilemmas. I'm not completely unsympathetic to the pressure a journalist might feel to report something in the quote unquote right way. However, journalists are the gatekeepers of news, and as with every institution, there is bias muddying the waters. It is a male dominated industry, and the amount of men interviewed for stories reflects that, as it vastly outnumbers the amount of women. Same with race, people of color are rarely interviewed unless it is a racially centric story. I also feel, while the wording reporters might choose for a specific story comes from a place of trying to do it justice and commit to accuracy, that there is an unconscious bias that permeates the news culture. It is indicative of American values and stereotypes that only continue to be perpetuated by the news media. A person of color accused of a crime is often portrayed immediately as guilty, and the wording chosen reflects that. Whereas the same crime committed by a white man will most likely earn him the courtesy of alleged, followed by whatever he has been accused of. Finally, the way the media has split into mainstream conservative and liberal is conducive to bias. Journalism of assertion removes the directive to be impartial, and in doing so, facts get watered down with opinion, and people are swayed by the conviction with which the news is presented and sensationalized. All this leads to further divisiveness in society. Nearly every outlet maintains this us against them mentality by putting the spin on it that it will reinforce their audience's existing beliefs. This is how the idea of fake news has come about. It is also partially responsible, perhaps, for the 24/7 news cycle, which covers the stories that will receive the most attention at the time, while other important stories fall through the cracks. The attack on the Capitol on January 6, mentioned in the chapter, is a good example of how dangerous mob mentality can be. Although journalists were a target of these attacks, and certainly not the main perpetrator, the constant coverage of vitriol, absurdity, and drama created a powder keg of discontentment and rage that came to fruition. I tend to lean more towards situational ethics, at least when it comes to exposing people in positions of power or large corporate entities that disseminate more harm than good. I think people deserve to have the facts so that they can make their own decisions and work together to create a society we can all better prosper in. However, the chapter posed the question of whether I think there should be a comparable media system on the left to counterbalance the conservative media system. In truth, I don't think that's the answer. It seems more advantageous to work towards reverting back to an impartial or more centrist system of journalism, in that everyone is essentially getting the same news based on fact and verified sources and can draw conclusions and engage in healthy debate from there. rather than a system in place that puts people into two groups and frames news stories around what they feel those groups should believe about it.